There we are. Right, now this is the awkward moment where we hopefully have people join. Get to see the numbers tick up. Hopefully more than 5, but we'll see. Okay. Hello, everyone that's joining. I'm going to stick the comments up so we can start to see that coming through. Hello, welcome. We're going to get started in just a minute. Just allow the late people to arrive. Okay. All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Tristan, your host once again for this Whiskey-Me live tasting. I'm one of the co-founders of Whiskey-Me, and I'm very happy to be once again presenting this month's dram to you guys. I don't know how many months we've been doing this for now, but since the start of lockdown, so what's that, 5 months, something like that? And very enjoyable it is too. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. I know we've had a few inquiries about the Whiskey-Me Glencairn tasting glasses, which are part of the membership reward program because we hit our subscriber count. Good news, we now have those in our possession. So obviously it takes a while for glasses to be made and to be custom printed and all that sort of thing. But they have arrived, and we now have the sort of laborious task of individually packing every single one of them because they don't come individually packed. And we'll be sending those out probably starting next week in batches. So if you don't receive next week, then hopefully we'll have people starting to receive them the week after. Apologies it's taken so long, but you know, coronavirus, and you know, we've done everything we can to get them as quickly as possible. But yeah, there's over 1,000 glasses being sent out, which is pretty cool. I'm looking forward to getting my one as well because this is the tasting glass I'm currently working from. Works perfectly fine, but it'd be nice if it said Whiskey-Me on it. Anyway, on to this month's dram. And as usual, we've got a special guest joining us, a great friend of mine who's joining us from Edinburgh. So it's kind of on topic. She actually lives in London these days, which is the wonderful Miss Georgie Bell. And here she is. Hi, Georgie.
Hi.
Nice to have you on. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
That's all right. So Georgie actually was a bit of a trooper during lockdown, and every single week was hosting online tastings across the Bacardi Malts portfolio, and it became like a little bit of a landmark occasion in the week that sort of kept the people that were on those tastings sane. It was because during lockdown, like weekends and weekdays sort of became null and void. Everything was just the same thing every single day. What day of the week was it? Is it Friday, Georgie?
Friday, and everyone knew it was Friday because it was a tasting for 12. We did it for 12 weeks in a row. It was like better than the countdown of the 12 days of Christmas. We did the 12 weeks of whiskey during COVID.
It was fantastic. We pretty much exhausted every whiskey in your range as well, didn't we?
Including Craigellachie 31. Like, we really pulled out the stops on it. Yeah. So we've now gone down to monthly, mainly for sanity purposes on my side from packaging.
Yeah, well, you had your own sort of Whiskey-Me going on, didn't you? You were packaging up a lot of little bottles and sending them out every week. So Georgie, you're global head of malts, global malts ambassador for Bacardi. Yeah, for Bacardi. Now, some people listening to this might be going, well, Bacardi's a rum. What the hell's that all about? So do you want to tell us a little bit about where the malts sit within Bacardi and what your job is?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right, Bacardi is a rum. But Bacardi, the company, is also the world's largest family-owned spirits company. So not only do we have Bacardi, but also some very familiar names you might come across like Grey Goose and Bombay Sapphire, Martini. And then on the whiskey side, we own Dewar's, the blended Scotch whiskey. The 32-year-old recently won World's Best Whiskey at an Amazing Whiskey Awards, the double, and then 5 single malts. So it's my job to look after those 5 single malts around the world. So underneath that umbrella, we have Aberfeldy, Aultmore, Craigellachie, Royal Brackla, and the Devon. And I believe you've tried a few of those within the Whiskey-Me packages in the past?
Yeah, we've done Brackler, we've done Craig Gellicky, I think that, and then obviously Aultmore. I think that might be it so far, but we're getting through them one by one. So if you're a Whiskey-Me subscriber, which hopefully you are, if you're watching, expect to eventually taste the other ones that Georgie's just mentioned, because they're all cracking malts, and
Yeah.
a lot of them, or a few of them anyway, they're quite sort of new additions as like distillery bottlings, aren't they? It's not always been the case that you could get hold of products like Craigellachie and Aultmore easily, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what's really exciting about the range of whiskies and the distilleries that we have. I feel like we're small but perfectly formed. You've got 5 single malts, 5 distilleries that all portray a different style of whiskey. So there's that really nice sort of spectrum of flavors across the range. And a lot of the distilleries date back to, well, all apart from one, date back to the 1890s or 1800s. And with Aultmore, Aultmore as a distillery dates back to 1898. So they've all got this incredible history behind them, but you're totally right. For a very long time, they were just used as blended whiskies or whiskies for blending purposes, as the majority of distilleries in Scotland are, and I'm sure you've spoken about that in the past. And then it was in 2014 that finally we kind of like gave in to public sort of like bursts of celebration about the fact that we'd finally launched them as single malts in their own right with their own spotlight. And I think speaking of that and that history is quite nice with Aultmore that we're going to taste today, because that's definitely one that has been integral within the blended Scotch whisky world for a very long time, has had this very high accolade around it, and people have thought highly about it, but has been quite hard to come by in the past until we did launch it under its own banner.
Yeah, fantastic. I keep getting chastised by the people who watch this for like taking too long to actually get to the tasting. Like, so there'll be a lot of pleased people when I say, let's get on with the tasting. Because I think Craig was on this last month, who's a good mutual friend of ours,
Who's
and it
Craig?
took like 20 minutes. Craig Harper.
I know.
And it took like, I was joking. It took like 20 minutes before we got to the tasting, and even the tasting lasts like another 20 minutes. So I've got my pouch here of Aultmore
I've got my
12. Yeah, of course you have. It's one of the benefits of being the Global Malts Ambassador, right?
whiskey on demand. No, this actually came from a colleague of mine, Matthew. He dropped it over to me today. Came up to Edinburgh recently for a little holiday. So, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about anything about the distillery that sort of makes it unique in terms of the production or things in the production that lead to the taste of this whiskey.
So Aultmore, as kind of background to that, and I won't go on too long, don't worry, and I think you can smell and nose this while I talk. Aultmore as a distillery has always been known as a top dresser or a Class A malt within the whiskey world. And there are certain other whiskies out there that have that status, and it means that when a malt master or a master blender, such as Stephanie McLeod's, our master blender for Dewars, she's got certain whiskies out there that when she adds them to a mix, they're like that extra pizzazz, that little extra spritz of like perfume or aftershave you put on before you leave the house, And Aultmore's always been seen as that within the whiskey world. And Aultmore as a distillery makes a whiskey which is super light and clean and fresh and grassy. So when you add that to a blend, it's almost like adding white to a paint. It just lifts all of those colours, and it does that within a blend. And I think it does that very well in the 12-year-old. So this whiskey, as I said, when you kind of walk through the distillery, and unfortunately the distillery is closed to the public apart from one day a year, which is the Spirit of Speyside Festival. But when you walk through it, you get this lovely grassy aroma that comes from the still house. And I think that grassiness is protected by the cask types that we've got in this. So it's a mix of first fill and refill bourbon and sherry casks. So it's kind of a bit all over the place. But it means that you get that lovely, light, sort of quite pure distillery character coming through with that toffiness. So I think that's why on the nose, for me anyway, there is that beautiful, light, clean, fresh pear, fresh apple. Like you can imagine eating a pear and having sort of the juices dribbling down your chin, sort of thing.
Yeah. So the idea of the barrels is that it doesn't overwhelm the spirit. You don't want too much of that oaky character. I mean, that's something that sometimes can be, a little bit confusing, I think, for people who enjoy whiskey, because there's that assumption that more wood means better whiskey, or older product means better whiskey. But, I like to think that we're getting to a stage now of whiskey where we understand that there's a balance to be had between maturation character and distillery character, right? You want to be able to identify, or at least find something familiar within a dram with regards to the distillery it's from, because otherwise then it loses its sense of place and becomes sort of a whiskey that could be from anywhere, and that's not exciting when it comes to single malts, because we associate single malt with place and with people, and being from that single distillery.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to have that distillery blush coming through, which is nice to have, which is why it's nice to have that balance between cask type and distillery in one. And even if we'd put this whiskey into a first fill sherry cask and left it for 12 years, yeah, it would taste absolutely amazing. And we do have expressions within the Aultmore range that have elements of first fill sherry influence in them, but it is quite overpowering. And when you have a light, clean, grassy style of new make, if you put that into an overpowering cask, you lose the provenance, And I think there's a time and a place for every whiskey. And the thing I really like about Aultmore 12 is that it's almost that aperitif style of whiskey, that first whiskey of the evening, and something that really wakes your palate up.
So if we're going to do, I often like to do the analogy of an orchestra, especially when you're talking about blending whiskey. Like you've got your kind of deep bassy or horn or trumpets, whatever, and you've got your percussion. Would you say that this is like the string section of the orchestra, that kind of top, sprightly, kind of springy, vibrant component of a piece of music?
Yeah, I'd say it's like violins or flutes.
Flutes, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Playful. Yeah.
You're speaking to an oboist here, so when you're like, oh, hey, you didn't know that one.
I always wondered what the name for someone who practices oboe is. I didn't know if it was an oboer or an oboist, so that's good to know now.
Oboist, but I'm pretty sure Homer Simpson calls it an obomaphone.
Well, we'll go with him. I mean, he is font of all knowledge, really. All right, so yeah, it reminds me a little bit of like when you get what is it, rose lemonade? That sort of really fresh, slightly floral, fresh, and there's that. It's summertime. I mean, you wouldn't know. I'd normally say it's applicable to the weather at the moment, but I don't know what it's like in Edinburgh, but there's a storm howling outside in Cornwall, so maybe not as current weather.
Yeah, it's pretty what do we say, Drake up here, pretty grim.
Yeah. But if it was a summer's day in August, as it should be, this is a perfect dram really to be drinking right now.
Yeah, it's like that. It's the 5 o'clock spring summertime whiskey, or when you're wishing that it was summer. It kind of brings you back to that.
Sure.
It's also, I should say, 46% non-chill filtered and no caramel colouring.
There you go. And yeah, 46 is great. That it's that's becoming the industry standard, even where 12-year-old wouldn't traditionally have been that sort of entry level, play at say 40% ABV. Still plenty of products out there like that. So it's sort of putting a line in the sand there and saying, you know what, it's 12-year-old, but this is quality liquid and we want to bottle it at the correct strength, and that's great.
Yeah, and hopefully I think you'll find, I think that the 46% really helps carry through some of those flavors that you get. Obviously, if you're tasting this at home and you're thinking, oh, it's 46%, I need to add water, it's totally fine, but just be wary that it might go a little bit cloudy because it is non-chill filtered. Yeah,
it's delicious. And the other thing about that strength is it sort of just gives a bit of grip on the palate, which really lengthens out that finish as well, draws it out, which, you know, can sometimes be something that's missing from lower strength drams, especially younger ones. But this has got some real weight to it, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's got that lovely oiliness in it. So it is still fresh, but it has that long sort of oily longevity in the palate. So it does go on for a while. It kind of feels like you've just sucked a pear drop, you know, and it's got that lovely sort of fresh pear note, a little bit of vanilla in there coming from the cask.
Yeah.
But all in all, it's just a really delicious whiskey.
It is. I bet it works quite well in a highball actually as well, because it's got those sort of top notes. Like I bet diluted with soda, when you bring that carbonation in and chill it down as well. The first thing I said, wasn't it, was rose lemonade. I bet that it really kind of delivers when it gets lengthened out.
One of my favorite drinks with it actually is a highball with like a home pour of Aultmore 12, and then a splash or a large splash of Martini Bianco.
Oh yeah.
So you get that lovely floralness coming in from the white vermouth, and then soda, and then if you want to be fancy, put a couple of pear slices or a pear slice in the top. And that's really delicious. A very easy way to upgrade your highball by putting in that vermouth in there to help bring out the floralness that you get in the whiskey.
Yeah, I bet there's a sherry as well you could use in place of vermouth that will work quite well as well.
Probably manzanilla would work really well, you know, with that
saltiness. Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, totally. Wonderful stuff. If anyone's got any questions, then now is the time to fire it over, because Georgie's going to be leaving us soon. She's got other things to do than just talk to me all evening.
I'm actually going to eat out to help out.
Yeah, I've been helping out a lot as well with my eating out on Monday to Wednesday. It's been a serious burden in my life having to help out all these places, but someone's got to do it, right? Everyone has their cross to bear, and mine is eating out for lunch at the moment.
If you do add water to this, I should say, I think what I like about it is that it can take water, and it just brings out this nice icing sugar sweetness. So it feels like you've taken all of those like green apple slices and the fresh pear slices, and you just like sprinkle a bit of icing sugar on top, which is really lovely.
Wow, that sounds great.
Yeah, it really tastes water. And I know there's obviously opinions on like water, not water, but at the end of the day, it's your dram or your whiskey in your glass. You can do whatever the hell you want to do with it, really, as long as you enjoy it.
Yeah, I as usual, it's sort of becoming a bit of a trademark of mine. I forgot to bring any water to my tasting area, so I won't be adding any water.
It's fine.
Joe, here we go. I can put this up on the screen, I think. Joe has a question. Which is your favourite malt in the range, Georgie?
I think I'm going to give you a politician's answer to this one. I think we're very lucky with the range that we have, that there is a different whiskey for every occasion. I will say one of my favourite soft spot, it's actually one we tried recently on our little round robin whiskey group, is Craigellachie 23.
Well, yeah, that is my favourite whiskey in the range as well.
Yeah.
It's an absolute cracker. Unfortunately, it's a little bit too much money for us to be sending out to the Whiskey-Me subscribers, but it is a banger. It's in my. I said to you the other day, it's in my top 5 whiskies of all time. It's so good.
Yeah, it's just waxy and it's got that lovely tropical fruit note coming through, and yeah, so I really like that one. I really like the Aultmore range as well. This 12-year-old is kind of, sounds silly, but it's kind of my equivalent of a daiquiri. You know, when you have a daiquiri when you're drinking a couple of cocktails, let's say, and you have one. I'm
familiar with this, yeah.
And you have one to just wake your palate up, and you go, right, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm good.
You know what that's called? It's called a snackery.
Yes, I potentially may have done a few of those. But it just like you know, wakes your palate up because it's got that beautiful hit of like citrus. Aultmore 12 is my equivalent of that, because it is just so fresh that within the whiskey world, it's quite, it cuts through a lot of the toffee sherryness that you get quite a lot of the time.
Good tip. Yeah, it's picking your favorite whiskey is a difficult one, I think, because it does depend so much on like setting, on who you're with. I mean, the Craig 23 is one of my favorites because I've always enjoyed it in good company as well, and that always helps. And some of the other whiskies I think of that are my favorites, it's actually more about where I was, and that was probably in Scotland on a beach, or you know, at a distillery, or you know, up in the Highlands or whatever. But that's like you said, that's the beauty of it, and it's like cocktails as well, because I get asked a lot, "What's your favorite cocktail?" And the beauty of cocktails and of whiskey is that you don't have to pick a favorite. There's tons of them, and you can pick the best one for the particular occasion. So yeah, right. A couple more questions if you've got time, Georgie. Let me just bring these up. Simon wants to know why we don't do a special for the 23. I mean, we could do a special for the 23. What we could do is we could stick it up on the website and just basically see how many people want it, and then we can just buy that many bottles and split it and send it out as a special one-off, because it is honestly something that you want to try before you die. It's that good. Ed, what got you into the whiskey industry, Georgie?
I, like many others, was a bartender, actually in Edinburgh, and I kind of fell in love with whiskey on the back bar. Long story very short, did my undergrad dissertation on whiskey and regional identity. I studied geography. Worked at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society behind their bar. While I was there, I did a second degree in distilling, so biochemistry and chemical engineering of distillation, through the Institute of Brewing and Distilling. And then I've been a global brand ambassador for 8 years now, almost 9. And I'm also a member of the Worshipful Company of Distillers. So kind of came into whiskey from the education route and bartending.
Basically started as a bartender and then got like every qualification going, plus a really good job in whiskey. Yeah, it's good effort. Cool. Well, we will leave it there, I think. I'm going to finish the rest of this pouch in private. And Georgie, thanks ever so much for joining. I know you're technically not working at the moment, so appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and I'm going to enjoy the rest of this dram before we go out.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, do that. All right. Thanks ever so much, guys, and we will see you back here next month. Goodbye.